Hi everyone, it's Hilary here. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon. I'm delighted that we've been joined by Laura Kirby for the session. So this afternoon we're going to be looking at pathological and Laura has a company called Positive Autism Support and Training, which you may have heard of. This is her detail here on the screen. Before we get going with Laura, I just want to go through a few housekeeping things with you so that you know exactly what we'll be doing on the webinar, okay? If you lose contact with us during the session, because we're going live here, just try to log back in again using the link that you've got. And it won't be our end, it will probably be your end. And you'll be able to jump in again at some stage. But don't forget that because I'm recording, if you have problems and you miss sections, you can always listen to it back later. We're going to factor in a couple of minutes for questions. And so if you look on the panel that you have on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there is a section there for questions. Just type them in and I'll have a look at them at the appropriate time so that we get a chance to get some feedback from Laura before she goes. And finally, if you've got any other questions that beyond the online or anything else you want to let us know, then please just make contact. We'd love to get some feedback from you. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Laura now, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thanks very much, Hilary. Afternoon, everybody. First thing we're going to look at then is what PDA actually is. I'm sure it's something that you have heard a lot about recently. It seems to be the thing that people are talking about within autism at the moment. There's obviously been some television programs recently that have really brought PDA into the public eye. So it's great to be able to do this and be able to talk to people about an issue that, a condition that I think is causing a huge amount of difficulty, whether you're a parent or working in a school or college. So really, I've just sort of broken down here what PDA is, and pathological really is that it's an extreme way that's not normal, and again, I'm sure those of you who either have children with PDA or work with children with PDA will identify that their behaviour sometimes is very extreme. We're also going to look at what a demand is during this webinar, and then also look at how individuals with PDA will avoid, because they're very good and very clever at coming up with some quite interesting ways of doing that. This quote here is from a lady called Jane Sherwin, who many of you may have read her book that she has written about her experiences of being a parent of a daughter with PDA. Jane has written a book called My Daughter Is Not Naughty, which is quite a difficult read, actually, as she explains the journey she's been through with her daughter. But the key word here about PDA is anxiety, and it's the anxiety-driven need to be in control at all times that you have to be aware of when you're working with individuals with PDA. There's a little bit of the history of PDA here. You can see from this timeline that it really became, a lady called Elizabeth Newson started to look into PDA back in the 1980s, when she noted that there were children and individuals who didn't quite fit the normal autism spectrum, or autism. Their behaviour didn't quite sort of fit, and that's something that I hear a lot when I go into schools and colleges, that they say, well, they've got a diagnosis of autism, they've got a diagnosis of Asperger's or high functioning autism, but they're just something doesn't quite fit, and it's usually that they're more sociable, which we're going to look at in a little bit. You can see then that there wasn't a huge amount happening really until the 2006, and I think that's when I first heard about PDA. And I can actually remember a telephone call that I received from a parent who had said that she had heard about PDA and it described her child to the absolute T. And I remember looking at this and thinking, this is something different, this is something new, but it fitted the description of some of the most complex and challenging individuals that I was working with, whilst I still worked in a school. The characteristics of PDA then, this is taken from the National Autistic Society website at the beginning of this year. I think it was back in April that there sort of seems to be a shift, particularly with the NAS, who recognised that PDA was actually part of the autism spectrum rather than being a subgroup. Previously it had been, PDA was in the PDD-NOS bracket, the pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified bracket, which is where sort of the behaviours that didn't quite fit the normal autism diagnosis were going. And again, it highlights here that the central difficulty for people with PDA is the way that they are driven to avoid demands, and again, it's this anxiety-based need to be in control. And then the last part of this quote here, again, is very, very important with PDA, is that people with PDA seem to have a better social understanding and their communication skills are better than others on the spectrum, and that they can use this to their advantage. And again, the young people that I work with or have worked with the PDA type traits are very good at manipulating social situations. It's worth saying at this point as well that PDA, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is quite a controversial condition, quite a controversial diagnosis still. It's not in the DSM, not in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5. Therefore, a lot of professionals do not recognise it and will not diagnose it. There's also a bit of a postcode lottery. There are some local authorities that will diagnose, and you will see PDA on statements or EHCPs, but most don't. And I know that causes a huge amount of frustration and confusion for parents. And my advice to parents, if they are unable to get a formal diagnosis of PDA, is to really push for a autism spectrum condition diagnosis, but to make sure that it's highlighted in that diagnosis or on the EHCP that the individual's behaviour is driven by anxiety and that they have that demand avoidant type behaviour. So we're going to look now at some of the behaviours associated with PDA, and again this first one here, that they can often be hypersensitive to other people's voices and facial expressions, is really quite the opposite of what you would expect with normal autism. And I know that this is something that I've had to speak to some of the TAs that I've gone in and done some work with, who are used to working with the more typically autistic learners, saying, you need to be very careful because you might be telling a student that you're not angry or you're not upset, but your face is telling a very different picture, and it might be that they're used to working with people with autism that wouldn't pick up on that, but people with PDA are quite, can be very sensitive to those non-verbal cues. They can be very over-familiar with adults and peers, and I think actually many are more comfortable with adults than children. They may take on the persona of others, and I've heard them, children and teenagers with PDA described as sort of being like little policemen within the classroom, which can obviously cause huge social problems with peers. Something that I see a lot and hear a lot is that children and students with PDA appear to behave, very well in school or in college, but actually what it's quite sort of common is that they then behave very differently at home, and the reason for this is that they are going into role in order to comply whilst they're at school or college, and they are playing the part of a good student and a student that can follow the rules. And what often happens then is that you get this complete meltdown when the child or young person gets home. And the analogy that I use is like having a Coke bottle in your bag that's been shaken up all day, and then when you get home you take the lid off the Coke bottle and you get this huge explosion. But it's very common for individuals with PDA to behave very differently in different environments, and again that can cause quite a lot of difficulty for parents because they don't feel that they're believed, because they're describing a very different type of behaviour at home to what schools and colleges are seeing during the day. The bottom point here as well is that, as I said earlier, these individuals can be incredibly challenging, and they may have a panic attack or meltdown if they become very aggressive, and this can result in aggression towards others. And again, I think the key word here to focus on is panic attack. I think if you regard this behaviour as a panic attack rather than bad behaviour or challenging behaviour, you'll automatically become, one, a lot more sympathetic to that behaviour, but secondly, I think you then look at the causes of the behaviour rather than the behaviour itself. With PDA, often again, like autism, there can be an absolute unawareness of the impact of their behaviour, but on the other hand, they can be very socially manipulative. So sometimes they're very aware that their behaviour is causing distress or other forms of discomfort to those around them, and they'll use that to their own advantage. As I've just said, they can behave very differently at school or college. Because of the need to remain in control at all times, they can find it very difficult to follow routines if set by others, and that will also include behaviour management plans. If you think that if you're rewarding somebody, then you are in control of whether or not they get that reward. So often the behaviour management plans that have worked very successfully with young people with autism do not work effectively at all for people with PDA. And then again, similarly to autism, they will often have the very significant sensory issues. So again, these quotes are from Jane Sherwin. These have come from her daughter who has PDA. And you can see that, again, it's this absolute need to be in control that causes the behaviours. And I think what's also interesting here is that the thought bubble on the right-hand side, so my anxiety stops me from doing the things that I want to do, as well as the things that I don't want to. And again, the things that her daughter enjoys, if it's suggested by somebody else, she's not in control and therefore does not want to do it, and is unable to do it. So looking at demands, we are constantly putting demands on children and young people, but particularly within an educational setting. And there's different types of demands. So there's the very direct demands. So you can see that those would be things that you might ask a child to do at home, but also in school, start your work, write your name, write your desk, get ready for PE, go outside. Again, all of those, if you're giving an instruction like that to somebody with PDA, you're going to raise their anxiety. On the right-hand side here, you've got more subtle demands. There's also silent demands, so things that we don't have to say, but we just expect people to be able to do. And then self-imposed demands. So it could be that a young person or an individual with PDA will start doing a task and then won't be able to finish it. And it could even be that they won't be able to speak. I have actually been working with a young person with PDA who doesn't speak now because of the expectation and the demand that is being placed on her to do so. So there's all sorts of ways that demands can be avoided, and as I said earlier, people with PDA can be very clever, very manipulative and avoiding those demands. So the manipulation comes into play here. You can get the flat refusal, I can't, I won't, or no. Excuses such as my legs don't work. You often get people with PDA saying that they don't feel very well, or that they're injured and that's why they can't complete something. They might try and distract, argue, delay. So I'll do it in a minute, I'll do it in 5 minutes. They may suggest alternatives to the task that you've actually done, or that you've asked them to do, because then again they're putting themselves back in control. Or they may even just withdraw into fantasy, and they can't do it because they are somebody else entirely, which again is very difficult to work with. As I've said earlier, PDA is now being more recognised as an autism spectrum condition. But it's very, very important to remember that it is still autism, and that people with PDA will share many of the traits that people with autism have. So they still have difficulties with socialising, sensory, relationships. The anxiety is again the key area, and the emotional regulation. And there's a saying, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and it's exactly the same with PDA. When you've met one person with PDA, you've met one person with PDA. They will still all be very different, and it is still a spectrum condition. So you can have people who are very severely affected by PDA and others that are less so. So the key here is that you work with individuals, you don't work with labels. Some ways here that autism differs from PDA. I get told quite a lot, oh, well, we don't think they've got autism because they've got really good eye contact. People with PDA are good at learning to socialise. As I said, they may be able to go into roles. They may learn how to make better eye contact. People with PDA prefer spontaneity and dislike routine. And as I said earlier, they don't always respond very well to very rigid behaviour management plans. They can often be more imaginative. So I've got a few young people I work with who have PDA who are absolutely brilliant at drama, love drama, which can be, you know, the opposite with some of the people I've worked with the more typical autism. They may have better conversational skills, be more empathetic. There's a similar number of diagnosed boys and girls, males and females. And again, the key difference really is that the pathological demand avoidance, the measures that they just go to avoid those demands. The other condition that PDA is often confused with is ODD, and there are a huge number of similarities here. The key difference is that individuals with PDA have much higher anxiety and will go to far more extreme levels to avoid demands. But it's really the demand itself that the individual with PDA will reject, whereas with ODD, it's more the position of authority than the demand that's rejected. But there is a huge amount of, again, confusion between PDA and ODD. I have seen both on diagnosis, and I have met professionals who have said PDD is ODD. So again, it's controversial, and sometimes it is difficult to unpick the two.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sure that, like me, you want to find out more about PDA. There's quite a lot of information that Laura's given you there. So don't worry about if you've picked it all up right now, because we'll be able to send you a recording so that you can play it back and stop and pause when you need to, okay? But I just want to use this opportunity for you guys to find out how you can get the most out of Laura, really, because she doesn't do that many training sessions, but she has got some coming up I want to tell you about. So there's some dates in December here, and there's an accredited training. So level 2, and who's that aimed towards, Laura, the level 2?
That would be staff who work in schools and colleges, but obviously we work with people in prisons or other organisations. It doesn't have to be schools and colleges, but it's people who it would be beneficial to them career-wise to have an accredited.
Okay, so the one in Leatherhead is not about that.
No, the one in Leatherhead is strictly for parents and carers. So we look much more then about what's going on in the home environment.
Okay. And then the next one, the half day, which is non-accredited. So it's similar, but you don't have to write up everything.
No, you don't have to hand in a workbook or anything at the end of the day.
You get a certificate of attendance. Okay. Yeah. So here is the learning outcomes for your level 2. Mm-hmm. And so the learning outcomes are on the left, and on the right are all the different parts of the level 2 qualification. Yeah? Yeah,
that's right. So you can see that these are, again, if you're working or supporting individuals, children, teenagers and young adults with PDA, we really look at the impact of PDA particularly in the learning environment, and then we look at strategies to help overcome those, the impact of PDA, and we look a lot at behaviour as well, and we look at a lot at the underlying causes of behaviour and ways that you can reduce anxiety, because if you can reduce anxiety, then that can make a huge difference to individuals with PDA.
Okay. So that's to get them the most out of their education, I guess.
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely.
for staff working with young people with PDA.
Yeah.
And for any environment, not just for special school, it's mainstream.
No, absolutely mainstream. And I've just done the accredited training at a large school where I did 2 separate days. One day with the staff that worked in the school, the TAs and the teachers, and then another day with the staff that worked in the residential setting.
Okay.
They all found it really useful.
So if you can't get to one of the dates and you can't get your school or college to have Laura in, there is a home study access program here, so that it doesn't matter where you are, you can have this training and you get guidance from Laura through emails and telephone tutorials and stuff like that. So that's available as well, which is fantastic. So let's have a look. You've got here your fixed date non-accredited, so that's your half day, and the fixed date accredited your whole day. So that's 285, and that includes all of your everything for the accredited one.
Yeah, all the resources, certificate with OCN, registration with OCN.
Okay, super. And the parenting one in Leatherhead, that's 10 till 3, so that's pretty much a whole day, but it fits around the school.
Yeah, it fits around
program.
school. If you need to leave earlier to do a school pickup, that's absolutely fine. We usually finish at about 2:30, and then there's some time for individual questions after that. I think the benefit of that course as well is that you get to meet other parents who have children with PDA, which can be hugely beneficial.
So if you're not from the Surrey part of the world, then just to let you know that Leatherhead is junction 9 on the M25.
Yeah, and we're very near my office is very near the M25.
Yeah, okay. So that's a bit about what's available. So there's various different things that you can pick up on here with Laura, but because you've turned up today, Laura's very kindly made a special offer if you wanted to get onto one of these programs. So thank you, Laura. 15% reduction, and also your digital training video, which 6 simple steps for success when working with autism.
Yeah.
So that's a video recording of you working with a group, is that right?
Yes, a training course I did in London that was recorded, so you basically get the benefit of all the information from that training course without having to come up to the training course.
Fabulous. And by next week, if you get your order in, then you can tell us it's PDA Web is your code, and you will benefit from this early bird reduction and the digital video. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, I think we've got some time for questions, so I'm just going to grab the mouse and have a fiddle around. If you see the mouse moving, then don't be alarmed, and we'll see if we've got any. Questions. Okay, here's one. If I do the accredited course, does my school have to pay? Do you have to do it through the school?
No, well, I mean, it'd be great if you could get your school to pay, but no, absolutely not. If you want to do the accredited course, I can. There's absolutely no reason why you can't pay for it yourself, and you know, it doesn't matter who pays for the course. Obviously, if you can get your school to pay for it, then that would be better.
So I guess it's just people thinking you have to go through a school.
No, absolutely not. No, and you know, I can send certificates to people's houses. I don't have to go via the school at all.
Okay. Well, here's another one. What is ODD?
Okay, so ODD is oppositional defiance disorder. So that again is the main difference there is that it's the position of authority that the young person will reject rather than the demand itself.
Okay.
But there is a crossover, and I think that is one of the ones where there is probably the most amount of confusion.
Oppositional defiance disorder.
Yeah.
In fact, that's linked also comorbid with ADHD, isn't it? So it's the authority.
It's the position of authority.
Defied.
Yeah. So I think one of the good ways of being able to separate the two is that somebody with PDA wouldn't be able to accept a demand or an instruction from one of their friends or from a peer,
right,
whereas somebody with ODD can.
Okay, right. Here's another one. My son is rating an assessment. The paediatrician has said it will be an ADOS test.
ADOS test.
In your experience, how do PDA children score on the ADOS test?
I'm afraid I can't answer that with any real authority because I haven't seen enough research to be able to tell you that. What I do know is that a a lot of young people with PDA will get an Asperger's or a high functioning autism diagnosis, but they would maybe come out as atypical because they appear sociable.
Is that why it's not being diagnosed separately, individually on the DSM?
Yeah, I think that it's not in the DSM. That's why you can't get the diagnosis. But there are a lot of children who are displaying some of the symptoms of autism, sort of mapped against the diagnostic criteria for autism, but not all of them.
Okay.
The person that answered that question, I will try and find out. We can get their name and I can get back to them.
I've got the name here, so I'll print it off later. Here's another question. Would the accredited course provide strategies for dealing with adults with PDA? I'm in an FE college, and so I have adult learners as well as young people.
Absolutely. Yeah, the training course is for children, teenagers, and young adults with PDA.
Okay, so it crosses all of those.
Absolutely, yeah.
Another question: is the PDA training appropriate for staff working in a prison environment?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've done some training, autism training with prison officers, and I think that the PDA training course would be really, really appropriate. And in fact, I have had discussions with other professionals about the fact that we believe that there's probably a huge number of people in prison or in that system who have got undiagnosed PDA, autism, ODD, ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also doctors' surgeries, police force. I mean, any frontline services should know and understand what this panic attack looks like.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree.
So what's the cost of the home study course?
That's £150.
£150, and that's in a. How does that arrive with you?
Well, that's the beauty of the home study is that you can very much work at your own pace. So I basically give people the option. They can have as many phone call tutorials with me as they want. They can email me as often as they want. I have some people that will check in with me weekly, others who say, no, we're fine, we've got everything we need. And I don't hear from them for until they submit their paper. But basically, you'll get sent hard copies of all the resources, and you'll get sent them by email as well.
Digital copies as well. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
It's £150 to that question.
Yeah.
Please could you give us an example of how to approach a simple classroom demand, such as put your phone away? Whoever said that was a simple classroom demand?
That's a brilliant question. Yeah, the key to this is making the young person feel that they are in control. So you offer a choice. So you could say to them, would you like to put your phone in your bag, or would you like to put your phone on the desk? Would you like to put your phone away now, or do you need to put your phone away when you finish sending that text? So you are giving the illusion that you are in control. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of offering a choice, because you are in control of the choice, but the person that you're offering that choice believes that they are in control.
Right, thank you. So can you give one good strategy when working with the student with PDA in order to get them to cooperate?
Yeah, it's just what I've said again, really. It's giving that illusion of control. So offering choice or a challenge can be very good. So saying, I bet you can't. I bet you can't finish.
I bet that depends on the age of the student.
It would depend on the age, yeah. But challenge is great. Also, I have found, saying you can either write 3 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs for this piece of work. Usually you might get the 3, but that's more than you maybe would have got if you just given the demand directly.
Okay. What are your costs to deliver the training within an organisation?
Okay, that works out for 12 staff. It works out at £1,420, so it works out about £118 per person for the first 12. It then goes down to £100 per person after 12. Yeah, and depending on where you are, I'm very happy to do it for less than 12 and pro rata it as well. Okay. So it doesn't have to be 12.
Okay, so and that's the accredited.
That's the accredited program, yeah.
So the organisation, if it's not accredited,
it would be £350 for a morning, or £600 for a day's training. But again, we can, depending on where they are, we can
Okay.
That can be slightly flexible.
But you can discuss it. So
we
if
can
you've got,
discuss, yeah.
If whoever wants that information, just email over and we can look at the location, etc.
Definitely.
Is there a school college that specifically supports students that present with PDA?
There are some schools in Newcastle.
Are there?
There are. They are linked to the Newson Centre. So Elizabeth Newson, who I mentioned at the beginning of this. I would again need to double check their names. I've also heard that some of the Cambion group schools.
Oh yes, I've heard of them.
Are very good with individuals with PDA. I think it very much varies. There are some schools that are doing it brilliantly, and there are some schools that need to.
Is it residential?
Do a lot more.
School you're
some of the Cambion school,
Cambion,
I think a lot of them are residential. The key to working with young people with PDA, as I say, is to make them believe that they are in control. Now that can be very difficult to achieve in a mainstream environment, particularly with people who are more severely affected by their PDA. The key to it, and I will just dig out my notes actually, because there's a school that I've just also remembered where everything is delivered through very much a student-based learning. So everything is taught through the student's own interests. It's Robert Ogden.
Robert Ogden.
Robert Ogden.
Look that up then if you want to find out more about that.
So everything is taught through the student's own individualised interest. They set their own timetable. They choose when they're going to do things.
My gosh.
Which is fantastic, but again, I know it's very, very difficult to achieve that in a mainstream environment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. When are we likely to see that PDA is accepted under DSM?
Oh, I don't know. I think the next DSM is coming out in about the next 5 years. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of petitioning going on at the moment to get it accepted into the DSM. So,
but their DSM doesn't come out every year.
No, it's about it's about every 5 years.
Yeah, so there'll be a while yet.
There'll be a long time, yeah. But there are. I mean, I'm on quite a few Facebook forums and stuff, and there are a lot of petitioning. So.
Okay, here's an interesting one. It might take you a little bit longer to think about the answer to this. Don't you think that sometimes giving choice to a student/adult learner in an offender learning environment would open a massive tin of worms and potentially cause serious behaviour issues in the classroom? How would you suggest addressing that? I
think it's the way that the choice is delivered.
Right.
It has to be when you give a choice, you're in control. So if I said to you, Hilary, what would you like for dinner tonight? You could come up with something that I can't possibly cook. If I said to you, Hilary, would you like spaghetti bolognese or shepherd's pie tonight?
So it's restricted choice.
It's restricted choice. You're making the choice.
Yeah.
But I'm still in control.
Yeah.
Because I'm offering you the choice.
Okay.
Again, I understand that if you're too open with the choice, it could cause huge problems. But you have to restrict and make sure that you're not offering too wide a choice.
I guess you'd need to see a scenario on that before you could give a really good answer.
I think so.
Wouldn't you? So anyway, I think that a specific scenario could be much easier to answer than a general question like that. But it's a good question, and I think one that most people in an environment where they feel challenged by people in the room with them would be interested to know more about. Here's another one. We've got time for one more before they cut us off. Do students openly acknowledge that they have PDA?
Only if they know that they've got it.
If they've read about it.
If they've read about it. I really encourage young people to be made aware of their condition. I think whether it's autism, PDA, ADHD, because these conditions are never an excuse for behaviour, but they do help you understand it. And I think if you can understand the reason why you're behaving in a certain way, then obviously you're going to be better at sort of managing it.
I agree, and I think also that empowers that person, doesn't it? And if they wonder why they're like that, as they get older, it's much easier to manage that, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well that's all we've got time for questions-wise. But just to let you remind you that if you use the PDA web code, if you want to make a booking, then you will get the bonus items. But it has to be, you have to let us know, because obviously bookings come in, and if we don't know that, then we won't be able to give you the reduction and the the training video as well. Okay, I hope that you've enjoyed this session. I certainly have. It's a very big subject. I'm sure there's lots of answers to lots of different things, but thank you very much, Laura, for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
And let us know if you've got, forgot to tell you almost, here's a few more webinars coming up soon. I'll give you dates when I've got them in the diary, and hopefully we'll see a few of you again shortly. Here are our contact details again. If you've got any queries, bookings, more questions, just get in touch and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Have a lovely evening. Bye for now.